Whatever you do, never say this poem out loud because if you do, you might die. There is a cursed Japanese poem called Tomino's Hell, and many people believe that if you read it out loud, you will die or be cursed for the rest of your life. One of these deaths was Shuji Terayama, who made a movie after this poem, and exactly 1 week after the movie was released, he suddenly just dropped dead to everybody's surprise. Another time, this college girl was dared by her friends to say the poem out loud. And she did, and exactly 1 week later, she suddenly just died. The poem is right here, and for it to even work, you have to read it in Japanese. So all of us English speakers are on the safe side. Or so I think, but I'm not reading this out loud in English either. Now you can read it in your head and nothing will happen to you, but you literally cannot read it out loud. This is a very cursed poem in Japan, and many people believe it to be 100% real. So I don't know about you, but I'm not reading Tomino's Hell at all because I'm not risking anything.
I seen this video. It was a ghost call or whatever. So this police dispatcher received a call from a funeral home, but it was closed. And this happened at 3:28 a.m. by the way. I'm gonna let you guys hear the call and stuff, and let me see what you guys hear.
I hate hearing things, bro.
It respects the cops, bro, because I feel like cops be saying
yeah,
some
yeah,
and they can't say anything.
Hello, 911, this is Erica. How can I help you? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Okay, I heard like hello and it's cold.
I heard whispers. Apparently, the guy said, "Help me," and then after she said hello again, it said, "Help."
Yeah, because I heard, "Can you help me?"
And then they go send out police, a unit to go check out what's going on and if everything's okay. Guy gets there, realizes that the place is locked up. Place is locked up, bro. It's dark in there, and there's no sign of like life in the building, bro. So it's like, who the fuck would have called
At that time.
Yeah.
Where was that at?
Colorado.
If there are any cops out there who experience freaky shit, let us call you. Let's hear that scary shit.
You know what's the craziest part too?
No, the Five Nights at Freddy movie came out.
Oh yeah.
I just want to ask you, who do you think is the scariest character?
The puppet from the second game, for the ones who know, is the one where you have to constantly wind out the toy box or whatever it is.
And the one who I think is the scariest is Springtrap. So the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, right? When he was creating the game, he had to test it out because before you put out a game, you obviously want to test it out, make sure everything is good.
What, so he played on his own, or?
Yeah, so the first animatronic that jump scared him was Bonnie. After that, basically, he kept having nightmares of
Bonnie?
Literally every night he would have that same nightmare and stuff. It was always him in his room laying down, the door cracked open, and he just felt like somebody was outside there, like watching him. So in his dream, he would literally start hyperventilating and stuff. He would get up, go to the door, and then he would see Bonnie, but like weird and kind of deformed without eyes. And like, if it was made of real bunny skin, but like ripped off.
Like the withered version of the robots and stuff, you know how like there's like fucked up versions of them?
Realistic looking bunny, bro, the flesh coming off, and he would just close the door and he would hear like try to get in.
It's crazy how much your own creation can haunt you. That's how you know you did a pretty good job at a game.
Yeah, because you know exactly what scares you. Because at the end of the day, like for example, the dark, right? You're the one who's scaring yourself by envisioning shit being in the dark also.
Some of the deaths were a little unusual. I don't know what this thing is. It's predatory. The serial killer, there's a strong possibility he was here. The story of the occult group upstairs, that is real. People have said they've seen something, they were done. They never came back. The problem is they describe it as an animal, like a dog or a deer or something like that. And the growls and the weird sounds like that.
I'm a little bit on edge. This feels like Sally House on crack.
Hold on. Oh shit.
Are you saying we're in danger? Our Father. Are you gonna do something or not?
A victim.
My uncle's girlfriend was a witch and she was hexing the whole family.
Really?
Yeah.
How'd you find out?
They had to break into her house.
What
Yeah,
the
so My family has a family business. They're experiencing like the worst year of like losing so much money. And I have an uncle who he's just like super machista. His girlfriend would just make him into a bitch. Things he would never do. And this dude like straight ranchero. This guy would never touch a dish. Now all of a sudden he's doing all these things that, you know, you're supposed to do, but like he would never do. And people are like, yo, how did he switch up this hard, this quick? And then so there was already rumors that she was stealing from the business, to a point where my family, they decided to go break into their house and see if they have our stuff, because every time they're around, things go missing. So they asked my cousin, can you two break into this house and see what you find? And they're looking through the house. They decided to go in the attic. It's all fucking up right now.
Shit.
And when they go in the attic, they find different types of witch stuff and pictures of everybody in the family.
I just got chills all over my body, bro. I was about
like
to
my
say
shit's
that.
crazy.
You know what
right
the
now.
that, you know what that reminded me of? Hereditary.
Yeah.
Whenever they find out that the neighbor or whatever is the witch.
So what ended up happening after that?
A lot of negative. A lot of his kids passed away. There's a lot of car accidents. She's gone now.
That's scary,
man.
bro.
That's
I don't mess with that.
Wouldn't wish that on anybody.
I'm reconsidering our friendship right now. I don't even know if I should be hanging
Nah,
out with you right
trust,
now,
like-
bro.
Like my family now, every month they're doing limpias.
This man was caught on camera murdering his wife and he only got 10 years in prison. Carrie Birmingham, who was 60 years old, shot his wife Patricia Birmingham, who was 48 years old. He shot her 3 times outside their home in Spring, Texas, and the couple had been arguing for about 30 minutes after Carrie allegedly discovered the affair his wife was having. This incident was captured on video by his wife Patricia, and in the disturbing video, Carrie can be seen walking in the driveway with a bathrobe on and a shotgun in his hand. Carrie can also be heard telling his wife, quote, "Okay, bye. You're going to meet Jesus. I hope it was worth it," end quote, before shooting her 3 times and killing her. Whatever you do, don't look up the video. It honestly is pretty disturbing, and I wouldn't recommend watching it. After doing this, Carrie was arrested and charged with murder, being held on a $200,000 bond, and recently in 2024, Carrie Birmingham pleaded guilty to the murder, but claimed he shot his wife in the heat of the moment. And despite the jury being all females, the woman sentenced Carrie to 10 years in prison, with parole eligibility in 5 years. Now I'm going to play a short clip from the video showing Carrie talking to Patricia before he shot her dead.
Video?
I'll pull it. I'm mad enough to pull it. Okay. All right, goodbye, Reese. Nice to know you. You gonna meet Jesus.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
Why was this pop star murdered by a fan as she came off stage? Christina Grimmie from New Jersey was talented from a young age. At the age of 15, she decided to set up a YouTube channel in order to share her love of singing online. She started posting covers of pop songs and people loved it. She gained a huge 1 million subscribers and moved to LA to pursue her dreams. Other artists could see how talented she was. She made connections with some of them, including Selena Gomez. She actually eventually ended up supporting Selena on tour. In 2014, she ended up finishing 3rd place on the talent show The Voice. This grew her audience even more. However, on June the 10th, 2016, things would come to a tragic end. Christina was singing at Plaza Live in Orlando. Once the performance was over, she was eager to meet her adoring fans backstage. She planned to get some photos and sign some autographs with them. She had no idea this would be fatal. At 10:24 p.m, Kevin Loibel was waiting to meet the pop star. He'd been stood in line patiently. However, when she reached her arms out to greet him, he grabbed his weapon and shot her. 3 shots entered her head and chest. Now, Christina's brother, who was actually her manager, was there and witnessed the entire sickening incident. Acting on instinct, he rugby tackled Kevin to the ground. Tragically, though, it was too late. As Christina lay bleeding on the floor, Kevin unalived himself with his weapon. A member of staff at the venue described the situation as horrifying. Christina was rushed to hospital but tragically passed away. Now, police obviously couldn't ask Kevin why he did what he did because he was dead. They had to interview those closest to him to try and get a glimpse into the mind of the killer. What they found was that he left this chilling note on his door before leaving to go to the concert. It says, "Deepest sorrow for lost to the family, friends and fans of the very talented, loving Christina Grimmie." No other comments. It turned out that the 27-year-old from Florida had purchased weapons just the day prior. Now, frustratingly, it appeared that he'd gone into the venue with those weapons. His bag was seemingly not checked. Friends claim that the man was obsessed with the singer to an alarming extent. He would spend all of his time looking at her social media and pictures of her and videos online. When anyone would question him about it, he got really defensive. Christina's death understandably shocked so many people, and everyone was devastated. Fellow musicians rushed to social media to express their sorrow. Selena Gomez said, "My heart is absolutely broken." Her family created the Christina Grimmie Foundation in 2017 to raise money for victims of gun crime.
Disney cruises have a major pedophile problem. Just this year, 3 pedophiles have been arrested that were working on Disney cruise ships. So let's talk about all 3 of them. First up is 49-year-old Alvin Gonzalez from the Philippines. He was arrested in January of this year. The arrest report states that authorities had been tipped off to Alvin. So when the cruise ship came back to the port, they searched his electronic devices. And they found CP. I'm going to read to you from this news report. The video they found depicted a boy between the ages of 8 and 10 engaging in acts with a girl aged 12 to 14. So that was in January. Keep in mind, this guy was out on the open ocean surrounded by children with unlimited access to them. Then there's 28-year-old Emil Joseph Trazo. He was also arrested in February. He admitted to watching several CP videos while on board the Disney cruise ship. And he was also a part of a group chat that consistently sent explicit visuals of children under 10 years old to each other. So he had been doing this while there were children on board, looking at these materials, sharing these materials. And once again, he was out on the open ocean with unlimited access to children, and these kids and their families had nowhere to run if he were to do something. Then there's 44-year-old Terso Anthony Neri. Terso was just arrested this month in April, and he was a crew member of the Disney Dream. Once again, the investigation into Terso started from a tip. And when authorities headed to his cabin to check out his electronic devices, they were disturbed by what they found. On Terso's cell phone, they found numerous videos and images depicting CP or CSAM, with a number of different young children who, according to authorities, ages couldn't be determined. Terso also claimed that he was a part of a group chat that shared these images and videos with each other. And he told the authorities that usually he downloads these images and videos, looks at them, and then tries to delete them. Keep in mind, these guys were working on ships filled with families and children. Of all cruise ships, this is definitely the cruise ship that is filled with the most kids. And this is deeply disturbing that these people are working around kids all day and then looking at this stuff, consuming this disgusting, disgusting material at night when they're alone in their cabins on the ship. And with 3 of these people being caught just in the last year so far, it makes me wonder how many more are working on the ships right now that have yet to be caught. I mean, this is a major problem for Disney. This is something that should be addressed. I don't know how to possibly combat this other than doing more thorough background searches, possibly even requiring employees to hand over their electronic devices for a search before they're hired. But when you have 3 pedophiles in 1 year being arrested from this same company, and they're working around children, I think that this is something that definitely should be given more of a priority. And if you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available to listen to now on all streaming platforms. Shirley Temple was absolutely abused by Hollywood. These are some of the darkest things that happened to her. So at age 3, Shirley started dancing. And that's when she began to appear in things called baby burlesques, a title which is already just extremely disturbing. And Shirley Temple herself described these films as a cynical exploitation of our childish innocence that occasionally were racist or sexist. She also claimed that when she misbehaved on set at this young age, she was locked in a windowless sound booth and forced to sit on a block of ice. I mean, what? There was also a film role that she had when she was under 10 years old where she played a prostitute. And all you have to do is look at all of the clips and videos of these films that Shirley was in where she's kissing men, they're acting like they're in love with her. I mean, it's really disturbing stuff. When Shirley was 12 years old, she signed a contract with MGM Studios. And during her first visit to the studio, she met a producer named Arthur Freed. And according to Shirley, when she walked into his office for a private meeting, he unbuttoned his trousers. He then said, "I've got something here made especially for you." She then giggled nervously and the producer kicked her out of the office. This is a moment that she's talked about on shows like Larry King Live. Then, when Shirley was 17 years old, a producer tried to grape her. Apparently, the producer was David O. Selznick, an infamous old Hollywood guy. And one time when he was in private with her, he circled around a couch trying to get to her. She tried to evade him. He even locked the door, but Shirley eventually managed to escape before he could do anything to her. Keep in mind, she was still a minor at this time. She also talked many times about how producers and other people in Hollywood demanded that she sleep with them if she wanted to get a contract or be involved in a new production. And I'm sure that there were so many dark things that happened to her when she was younger that she never talked about, never wanted to bring up again, and things that have been forgotten with time. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The Shirley Temple iceberg goes really, really deep. Just check out this clip of her speaking on Larry King Live.
I went to MGM for one picture, thank goodness only one. And when I got there with my mother, we were separated. She went into the office of Louis B. Mayer, and I went into the office of Arthur Freed. And he was going to talk to me about a movie he wanted to put me in. I'm 12 years old, you know. And I thought he was a producer, but instead he was an exhibitor. And I'd never seen anyone naked before, except myself. So I had no clue about what was happening. And so it struck me so funny, I laughed at him. And I laughed uproariously. I had tears, you know, and he got infuriated. And he said, "Out, out, out, go."
Did you tell your mother?
Well, I was very quiet. I went down and met her in the lobby of the administration building. She came out very quietly from Louis B. Mayer's office. And we walked hand in hand silently to the car, which was unusual. We got in the car driving home. I said, "Mom, you won't believe what happened to me." And I told her what happened, and she got kind of quiet. She said, "Well, you don't know what happened to me." And Louis B. Mayer wasn't as bad as Freed was to me.
You tried
but
it.
he came on to my mother. And so we both decided that we didn't like MGM much. It was, you know, it was better at Fox.
This case will put you off ever going to school again. This child was kidnapped by a school security guard. She wasn't rescued for 10 agonizing years. Tanya Catch lived in Pennsylvania with her dad and his girlfriend. Her parents split up early in her life and she didn't have much contact with her biological mum. She also didn't really get on with her dad's partner either. She was feeling unwanted and confused and turned to drink and substances to cope. She struggled to connect with friends at school and would often bunk off, leaving her quite vulnerable. In 1995, she came across a man called Tom Hose. At the time, he was 38, and he was a school security guard. He had a son of his own, just 2 years younger than Tanya. Now, initially, she was scared that he was going to get her in trouble. Obviously, she shouldn't have been bunking off. Instead, though, he made friends with her. He started grooming the 14-year-old with gifts and money. As she was a child, this was very appealing. He would buy her jewelry and sweets, and she thought he had good intentions. Thinking he really cared about her, they ended up kissing. Then in February 1996, things took a really dark turn. Tom told the young girl that they could run away together. She obviously felt that she didn't really fit in anywhere, so she obliged. On the 10th of the month, Tom took the child and hid her in his home. He actually lived with his parents and son, so he had to hide her from those people. After being sold a dream, Tanya soon realized that this was more like a nightmare. She had to be kept hidden in Tom's bedroom. She was unable to make any noise or leave the property. He fed her leftovers like an animal, and she had to go to the toilet in a bucket. Tom also regularly SA'd the child. However, she was too scared to try and leave. He would emotionally abuse her and convince her that she was worthless and nobody would even care where she was. He even threatened her that if she did leave, he would kill her and her family. Now, Tanya was reported missing, but police had limited involvement. They already knew that she had a history of running away. Tanya was initially held captive for 4 agonizing years, just 2 miles from her home. When she turned 18, Tom got a little bit more confident to introduce Tanya to people, but called her Nikki. He was confident that she was brainwashed enough to never leave. He would let her out of the house by this point, but always gave her a strict curfew to abide by. Years went by where she was pretty much trapped in this house, apart from the odd occasion he let her out. The young girl was still terrified to make her true identity known. Then in March 2006, the then 24-year-old woman was brave enough to tell a member of the public that she was actually the missing girl. She told a kind couple who owned a local deli about what was happening. She said if they looked online, they would find her on the missing child's website. The members of the public obviously took this information to the police. Tom was arrested and Tanya was overjoyed that she was finally free. After holding the girl for 10 years of captivity, Tom pleaded guilty to SA, amongst many other offences, in 2007. Shockingly, he was given just 15 years in prison and was released in 2022. Now, shockingly, Tanya's dad actually blamed her for her own kidnap. Therefore, the two do not have a relationship anymore. Tanya, however, is happily married and now advocates for other victims of abuse and trauma.
At the beginning of this year, a 12-year-old boy was sent to Trails, Carolina, which is a troubled teen wilderness camp, and less than 24 hours later, he was killed. He was smothered to death after the counselors enclosed him in a bivvy, which is like a one-person camping tent. They're really small and typically have packed weights in them. On the evening of February 2nd, the boy, who's only been identified by his initials, CJH, was taken to the camp in Lake Toxaway after his parents paid for 2 strangers to take him from his home in New York. The camp states that they are a wilderness therapy program that serves kids with behavioral issues and those who have ADHD, autism, and PTSD. On his first night there, counselors stated that the boy was placed in a bivvy without incident. At this specific camp, the bivvies are placed on plastic sheets, and the sides are then folded up kind of like a canoe, so this is already dangerous. Bivvies include a breathable mesh inner layer that can be zipped, and an opaque waterproof outer layer that is basically a little door. Trails Carolina camp protocol requires that the top of the bivvies be covered with an alarm device that will alert the counselors if the kids try to get out. Well, the mesh on this little boy's bivvy was torn, so the counselors confined him in with a weather-resistant door, and then they put the alarm system on top of that door. It's important to note that bivvies typically come with a warning label that tells you not to close this outer layer all the way because it could cause breathing problems. So while the boy was inside, he was moving around a lot and making a lot of noise, so the counselors took him out. Once out, the boy was able to relax and fall asleep, but the counselors woke him up and forced him back inside the bivvy. The camp states that they could hear him moving around until 1 a.m., and then it went silent. The counselors reportedly did routine checks on the kids, but with the little boy's bivvy being closed all the way, they couldn't see inside. They just figured he was okay. But the next morning, they couldn't wake the boy, and when they opened the bivvy, they found him with his head in the enclosed corner of the bivvy and his feet at the opening of the door. He was found to only be wearing half of his clothes, so it suggested that he possibly suffered from hypothermia because of the construction of the sleeping area. It could have made him feel hotter than he was, but the counselors said that he was cold to the touch. They said they tried doing CPR, but it was too late. The autopsy states that his cause of death was asphyxiation due to smothering, and his manner of death is homicide. The medical examiner stated that the alarm placed on his bivvy and the plastic sheet surrounding it were factors that caused him to not be able to properly breathe. The report shows no sign of trauma or sexual assault, and there was no evidence of drugs or any natural causes that could have led to his death. He died as a direct result from being placed in a damaged bivvy by others with no way to get out. The camp has previously denied any responsibility and immediately after his death released a statement saying they were shattered and cooperating with authorities. They fully believe that this was accidental and even launched their own investigation into the boy's death. But the Transylvania County Sheriff's Office say that that's not entirely true and that the camp hasn't completely cooperated with them. The camp has since been shut down and had its license revoked. It's not clear if any charges will be filed, but authorities are conducting a criminal investigation into the boy's death. No arrests have been made, but police say that they do have suspects. These troubled teen wilderness camps need to all be shut down. In many cases, kids that are forced into these camps are abused, physically and sexually, and severely neglected. This little boy had ADHD, anxiety, and faced social challenges like making friends. I can't imagine his last moments and how terrified he must have been. In July of 2007, this entire family, who was part of a doomsday cult, mysteriously disappeared. Let's talk about it. So this is Simon Cadwell, his partner Chantel McDougall, their 5-year-old daughter Leela, and their friend Antonio Popic. Simon was an internet doomsday cult leader who published books about his beliefs, and he created a website called The Truth Fellowship. He had a pretty large following too. They all lived in a house on a remote property in a small town in Western Australia called Nannup. They disappeared in the summer of 2007 after telling friends and family that they were moving to Brazil to join a spiritual community because they felt that they didn't belong in modern society. But in the months leading up to their disappearance, Simon told a woman in his online cult forum that he was planning a peaceful family suicide pact, and after, Antonio would bury their bodies in and bushes before killing himself in the wilderness so no one would find his body either. When the woman questioned why he would be okay with killing his young daughter, Simon backtracked and said that they would just move to an isolated area where no one could ever reach them. Those who knew Simon said he was strange and controlling and at the time was on antipsychotic medication. Those same people also said that Chantel and Antonio were brainwashed by him and would do anything he said. The beginning of this strange mystery starts in May of 2007 when Simon was pulled over while driving. Someone had tipped off the police stating that Simon wasn't who he said he was, and when police looked into this, they discovered that he had stolen a birth certificate from a former coworker and had stolen his identity. In all reality, Simon's real name was Gary Felton, and he had fooled everyone for the longest time. So during that traffic stop, police were questioning his driver's license, which made Simon panic. 2 months later, the entire family would vanish. Right before their disappearance, Simon and Chantel sold their cars for somewhat cheap, and Chantel cashed the check for that at the bank on July 13th. The next day, which was their last known sighting, Chantel met with a woman to sell her 2 of the family's pet dogs. The woman who bought the dogs was originally supposed to meet up with Chantel the next day, but when she called Chantel, Chantel said, quote, "No, you must come today." The woman said that Chantel appeared super anxious and that the entire encounter made her feel so uncomfortable. A few days later, their landlord went to their Nannup house, and it was an eerie scene. The house was spotless, and all of their personal belongings were gone. The only thing left behind was half a bowl of rice and 2 notes, one from Antonio and one from Chantel, who said that the entire family moved to Brazil. They were reported missing sometime later, and what police found during their investigation only brings more questions. Just 2 days before they disappeared, a call was made from their Nannup home to Transwa, which is a public transportation company in Australia. Whoever called booked a bus ticket from Bridgetown to Northcliffe under the name of J. Roberts, but it was never used. But 2 tickets under that same name were used the morning of July 16th. One going from Perth to Kalgoorlie and one from Perth to Northcliffe. A passenger under the name of J. Roberts did get off at Northcliffe and someone did board a train to Kalgoorlie, but there's no evidence of anything after this. The day before, Antonio's phone traced to Perth and it was used to call a Domino's Pizza and a hotel. His driver's license was also used to check into a hostel in Northbridge. This was confirmed to be him as the Domino's driver confirmed Antonio was the guy he delivered the pizza to that night. As the other 2 tickets were being used the morning of the 16th, Antonio called Transwa for reasons unknown, and then he too vanished off the face of the earth. The investigation wasn't handled properly and lots of things slipped under the rug, like how a woman's shirt that possibly belonged to Chantel was found in a field in Northcliffe 3 months after she disappeared. The person who found it said it smelled like rotting flesh. This lead wasn't investigated until 2015, 8 years later, and at this point, a wildfire had come through and burnt everything up. In 2011, a Gary Felton checked into a caravan park in King River, which is near Albany. Authorities hunted down every Gary Felton in the country, but nothing ever came of it. Chantel's family is currently trying to raise funds to launch a new investigation to find them. They've even created a GoFundMe to help. At this point, her family believes that Chantel and Leela are likely dead and buried somewhere in Western Australia. This case has left me with so many questions. Did the entire family move to Brazil like they said? Are they living off-grid under different names? Did they take their own lives or were they possibly murdered? So many questions remain unanswered. Their bank accounts have not been touched since the day they disappeared. Whatever happened to this family remains a mystery 17 years later.
16-year-old was sentenced to 50 years in prison, and you won't believe what he did. In 2022, Noah Nay shot a 5-year-old girl in the neck and shoulder in Oklahoma. This teen, who I swear looks like a 9-year-old, was riding in a stolen car and purposely shot inside a home where the little girl was playing. But again, this was no accident. No one did this for a gang initiation. Luckily, the little girl survived, but had the bullet hit a spot an inch away, she would have definitely died. Noah was arrested, but not long after, he escaped the juvenile detention center by jumping a fence. He was found 4 days later, but when he was put back into the detention center, he repeatedly assaulted staff. Noah was sentenced as an adult, but the judge said that in 2028, his sentence can be reduced if he's proved that he's changed.
I swear the creepiest stuff always happens in hospitals. So Katrina was a nurse in the pediatric oncology part of the hospital, and she was looking after this one little boy that was in rough shape. It seemed like his treatments weren't working anymore, but despite all this, he stayed in pretty good spirits. And he would always wear his Spider-Man costume. Like every day, always in the Spider-Man costume. Sadly, the little boy eventually passed away from his cancer. But then, a few months later, a teen boy gets admitted down the hall. And this was after the little boy had already passed away, so there was no overlap between the two. This boy was also in pretty rough shape and his treatments weren't working anymore. But then one night, a nurse hears him talking to someone inside of his room, but there's no one there. So the nurse goes in to see who he's talking to, and she can't believe what he says. The teen said he just saw a little boy dressed as Spider-Man in his room talking to him. And this little boy was telling him all about Marvel and all about how much he loves Spider-Man. The teen boy ended up passing away a few weeks later, but that story always stuck with the nurses.
A few years after killing Jason Voorhees with a machete, Tommy Jarvis started to have recurring nightmares about the violent serial killer. As a result, he was sent to several psychiatric hospitals, before settling finally at Pinehurst Halfway House. Inmate Joey Burns was killed by fellow inmate Vic Farron not long after Tommy's arrival. A series of murders then happened in the local area when a couple of greasers were killed, followed by a diner waitress and her boyfriend the following night. Local Sheriff Carl Tucker believed that Jason Voorhees was once more alive and committing the murders. The following day, Raymond Joffrey was killed, followed soon after by Tina McCarthy and Eddie Kelso. This was followed by the deaths of Demon Winter and his girlfriend, Ethel and Junior Hubbard, Jake Patterson, Robin Brown, and Violet Moraine. The killer soon revealed himself, and lo and behold, it was Jason in his hockey mask. Or was it? After a battle with Tommy, Jason was thrown out of a loft window and landed on a bed of spikes and died. Upon removal of the hockey mask, the killer was revealed to be Roy Burns, Joey's father, not Jason. After the massacre at Higgins Haven, the body of serial killer Jason Voorhees was taken to the Wessex County morgue. Despite being hit in the head with an axe, Jason woke up and killed both the coroner and a nurse. He left the morgue and headed back to Crystal Lake. Conveniently, a fresh group of teenagers were making their way to Camp Crystal Lake on a weekend getaway. They spotted a hitchhiker on their way but didn't have any room in the car. Soon after they drove past, the hitchhiker was stabbed in the neck and killed by Jason. Upon their arrival at Crystal Lake, the teens had a party, as you do, which naturally didn't go down well with Jason. He then proceeded to kill Samantha, Paul, Terry, Mrs. Jarvis, Jimmy, Tina, Ted, Doug, Sarah and Rob. There's Rob there, bottom right. A showdown between Tommy, Jason and Trish led to Tommy shaving his head, in the hope that Jason would think it was himself as a child and confuse him. It did. Trish hit Jason and his mask fell off. Tommy then drove a machete through his skull. Surely that was the end of Jason.
New things and shit. And this video shows a group of over 40 Golden Corral customers in a massive brawl over a steak shortage at a Pennsylvania location. Police are still investigating to see who threw the first punch. A chicken recently broke into the United States Pentagon before being caught and taken into custody. The Pentagon refuses to release any info on how the hen got in and any secrets it may have discovered. A woman named Darylyn Roberts was recently arrested after pretending to be a sign language interpreter on live TV. I don't know how, but she was on live TV multiple times before someone realized that she was just doing random hand motions. A British dog named Millie got stuck in a mud flat near the ocean with the tide quickly rising. Fortunately, authorities rushed to help using a drone with a sausage tied to it to lead the small dog to safety. Elon Musk himself recently reached out to a teenager who runs a Twitter account that tracks and publishes the location of Musk's private plane. Elon offered the kid $5,000 to shut it down until the kid replied, "How about 50?"
Imagine a teacher at your middle school sending inappropriate pictures on Snapchat and abusing children. Cassidy Krause is a 24-year-old teacher from a school in Iowa. Despite her being listed on Facebook as being married after getting married in July, there are disturbing reports emerging. She was recently arrested and charged with abuse after sending obscene materials to a minor. It's believed that she sent inappropriate material to students via Snapchat, and she has resigned from her role at the school. She's accused of SAing at least 3 students while employed by the school, the youngest student being just 13 years old. Court records show that her husband filed for divorce from her on the 28th of August. She currently faces up to 33 years in prison if convicted. It's reported that she has posted a $10,000 bond and has been released from jail for now. She is scheduled to return back to court on Thursday. She is yet to enter a plea. There has been a mass shooting in Indianapolis at a Halloween party. Police received multiple phone calls about a large party after midnight on Sunday the 29th of October. When authorities responded to the scene to disperse the party, they heard gunshots. A large crowd started running from the area. Tragically, a 16-year-old girl was pronounced dead at the scene and 9 others were injured. The victims' ages are believed to be between 16 and 22 years old. All 9 survivors were rushed to local hospitals and are in a stable condition. Reportedly, the party had several hundred people and 6 firearms were found at the crime scene. The promoter of the party is believed to have been inviting people to attend via Snapchat and Cash App. Police are begging anyone with any information to come forward and help them with the investigation. The deputy stated no one deserves to die at 16 years old because they go to a party. They said, "We're going to do everything as a law enforcement agency to do our part, but we need you to do your part."
Gruesome sports injuries that traumatized fans, Part 2. In 2017, Akil Mitchell took an awkward fall during which his eye completely popped out of its socket. Miraculously, he regained his vision about a month later, but now is forced to play with protective glasses. Paul George was playing in a 2014 Team USA scrimmage when he jumped up to block a layup. On the way down, his foot landed awkwardly against the hoop's pole and his lower leg horrifically snapped in half. In the Olympic qualifiers, French gymnast Samir Ait Said landed badly after a huge vault, causing his left leg to break in multiple places. In 1985, quarterback Joe Theismann was sacked, completely busting his right leg in half. 33 years later, on the same team in the same city in basically identical parts of the field, a player named Alex Smith suffered an equally disturbing injury to his right leg. The final score of both games, 23-31.
People now think there's drone footage that confirms that this ghost is real. Oh my god. So since the 1980s, locals in Cannock Chase in the UK have claimed to see the ghost of a black-eyed little girl in the woods. Multiple witnesses have reported seeing a little girl with soulless black eyes and a crooked neck popping out of the woods. Some say she's searching for her mother, and others say that she feels demonic. But now reports are saying that a drone may have caught a photo of her. This is the image that was captured this week, and people are saying they think this is the girl. Here's a close-up image of it where you can see her hair, you can see her crooked neck, and you can see the black eyes. But what do you think? Is it her?
Imagine starting to date a new guy, all is going well, and a month later he murders you with an ice pick. Katie Pham and Daniel Gunnarsson had been dating for around a month. Prior to the tragic event, friends of the Californian pair had been growing in concern at Daniel's behaviour. It was reported he started showing animosity towards his 21-year-old girlfriend. It was the 18th of May 2021 and Daniel went to his stepdad's home in Ridgecrest. When he arrived, he confided in him around his failing relationship. He then called Katie and arranged to pick her up. He then drove her back to his dad's house. He led Katie to the garage where the unthinkable happened. It wasn't until painters arrived at the house that the horrific scene was discovered. Now, it's reported that the painters had actually heard a woman screaming, but it wasn't until an hour later that they opened the garage and found a hideous scene. They found Katie dead, partially unclothed and lying face down, and David covered in blood. Police were called and David was charged with murder. Evidence from the scene showed that David had put gloves on and used a 24-inch long ice axe to attack Katie. Once she was deceased, he SA'd her. He was given 25 years to life in prison, plus an additional 2 years and 4 months.
This pedophile mom in Ohio committed one of the most horrific crimes I've ever read about. I'm going to add a trigger warning in here right now. This is a very, very disturbing story, so viewer discretion is advised. So this is Ashley Jessup from Ohio. And in 2012, she was found guilty of rape and sentenced to life in prison. But who did Ashley assault? Well, it was her own 10-month-old baby. At the time of this crime, Ashley was dating 24-year-old Jordan Russell. The two seemed to be very in love and they frequently exchanged explicit materials over email and text message, of themselves, obviously. But then in August of 2011, Jordan asked Ashley to do something shocking. He asked her to perform explicit acts on her own 10-month-old baby son. And obviously he wanted her to film it and send it to him so he could keep these videos and images. And for some shocking reason, Ashley actually obliged. And she performed graphic and gruesome acts on her own son. So later that month, Jordan had actually broken up with Ashley and he already had a new girlfriend. And this new girlfriend of Jordan's was going through his computer when she discovered these extremely disturbing images and contacted the police. So obviously when the details of this case were made public, everybody was absolutely shocked. And the judge in this case actually stated that in his 30-year career, this was one of the most bizarre and disturbing cases he had ever had to cover. So Ashley was eventually convicted of a litany of charges, including assault, rape on a minor, everything like that. And she's still in prison to this day, serving out that life sentence. Now, this is a really, really disturbing story, and I really do think that she should be in prison for a very, very long time.
These are haunting pictures of people moments before their death. This is Roman Gonzalez, a Puerto Rican singer with a huge fan base. He had millions upon millions of listeners worldwide. Early in 2014, he was involved in a motorbike crash with another vehicle, resulting in his death at the age of 27. The picture you see on the screen right now was taken by Roman moments before the accident killed him. It's unknown whether this selfie was a factor in his death. But literally moments after this picture was taken, his life ended. He was just enjoying his day, not thinking about dying at all. It goes to show that you have to sit back and take everything in once in a while. Next up is a photo of Petra and Gary Slock. Now, this photo wouldn't be eerie at all if it wasn't taken on the doomed Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. This plane was allegedly shot down by pro-Russian separatists on July 17, 2014, leading to an ongoing international investigation. Everyone on board flight MH17 was killed in the attack. Gary Slock and his mother Petra Slock took this photo right before takeoff, making them among the victims of the tragedy. May they rest in peace. Next up is the last photo ever taken of Princess Diana. The death of Princess Diana might be one of the most controversial deaths in history, because there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding her car crash, and many people think it was a cover-up, and many others think she was killed by the high-ups in England. This photo was taken by one of the paparazzi photographers in front of the vehicle, only moments before the fatal crash. So, what do you think happened? This is Pavel Kashin, who is a free runner. He would often perform jaw-dropping stunts with friends in dangerously high places. But unfortunately, Pavel made a fatal error during one of his sessions. This photo shows Pavel just moments after he lost his balance after landing a backflip off the wall. He then died after falling 16 stories. I would never understand parkour and free running for this exact reason, but people like to do what they like to do. May Pavel Kashin rest in peace. You won't believe what these parents did to their daughter, and before I begin, this is a massive trigger warning. This is Lacey Fletcher, and her parents let her rot away on their sofa in her own waste up to 12 years. 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher's body was found fused to the couch. Lacey was semi-naked and sitting upright in a sunken crevice in the sofa when she was found by police officers. She weighed 96 pounds and was covered in urine, feces, and maggots. Lacey was homeschooled since high school, suffered social anxiety, and had a severe case of Asperger's. But what makes this case so sinister is that Lacey had locked-in syndrome, which is when you're completely aware of everything going on around you, but you can't move any parts of your body except your eyes, and you can't talk. Meaning Lacey was sitting in this same position for 12 years in her own feces, urine, and maggots, completely aware of what's going on around her, but there's nothing she could do about it. All while her parents are living in the same house as her as she rots away. When the officers reached the house, they said the stench was so strong it almost made them puke. Lacey's body was completely surrounded and covered in feces and urine, and there were also severe ulcers on the body's underside. Her body also appeared completely rotten to the bone. She also appeared to have feces shoved in her face, chest, and stomach. But the sad thing about this case is that Lacey Fletcher's parents just completely gave up on her. Since she had locked-in syndrome, they just placed her on the couch and let her sit there for years on years on years, barely feeding her and never cleaning her. Her parents were in this house showering, cooking, and just relaxing, all while their daughter was rotting away slowly on the couch because of them. Can you just imagine having locked-in syndrome and being placed on a couch by your parents, and then you get neglected, starved, and ignored for years, and all you can do is just think in your own head about what's going on? Lacey could never ask her parents what they were doing because she couldn't talk. So you could only imagine the fear and anxiety Lacey was feeling throughout the 12 years she was stuck on the couch. This is one of the most sickening and inhumane cases ever, and may Lacey rest in peace.
I must admit, I have been putting this one off. Arthur's story does need to be told, but having a son the exact same age as Arthur was when he died, it's been absolutely heartbreaking researching his story. Trigger warning, as always, some of the details are quite hard to listen to. Arthur actually lived with his mother Olivia until early 2019. She described him as the light of her life, but she did have problems with alcohol and would often argue with men that she was seeing. One of those men was Gary Cunningham. Ironically, they met at an alcohol awareness course and began seeing each other, but their relationship was extremely violent and toxic. In February 2019, one evening after they'd been drinking, they got into an extremely violent argument, and Olivia grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Gary multiple times, killing him. She was sentenced to 18 years for manslaughter, which meant that Arthur then had to go and live with his father, Thomas Hughes. Just over a year later, Arthur was murdered. In April 2019, Thomas met a woman on a dating app, and he quickly introduced her to Arthur. Emma Tustin had her own place, while Thomas and Arthur were actually living in an annex behind Thomas's parents' house. And when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and the UK went into lockdown, Thomas took Arthur and they moved in with Emma. Just before his school closed due to lockdown, Arthur's teacher had actually expressed some concerns about his behaviour. She said that he'd developed an obsession with death and guns, along with a fear of being separated from or killed by his father. A meeting was set up between the school and Arthur's father, Thomas, and Arthur was actually seen by a number of medical professionals, but nothing came of it. And then the lockdown hit and Arthur was forced to spend all his time with his dad and Emma. In April 2020, Arthur's grandmother noticed bruises on his back, and she actually asked Thomas to leave Arthur with her instead of taking him back to Emma's, but he refused, and this actually prompted a call to social services. The next day, a social worker visited the house, and the bruises were explained away as being caused by a fight with Emma's son. The social worker concluded that Arthur was happy and safe, and that there were no safeguarding issues. In actual fact, Emma had coached the boys on how to lie to professionals and told them that there'd be consequences if they told the truth. This incident was actually reported again by Arthur's uncle, but wasn't followed up. Over the next few weeks, the abuse against Arthur escalated. He was often forced to stand in the hallway facing a wall for hours on end, and Emma would often record him when he was upset and send the clips to his father, Thomas. In these clips, Arthur could be heard saying "no one loves me," as well as crying for his grandmother and uncle. I'll play one of the clips now, just a trigger warning again, because it is hard to listen to.
I killed and dismembered my friend because of a video game. My name is Daniel Petrie, and I was 16 at the time of the crime in 2007. I played video games regularly, and that's how I met Gabriel Kuhn, who was 12 at the time. We played almost all the time together, and one day he asked me if he could borrow 20,000 coins from a game called Tibia, the equivalent of $1,000. He promised to pay me back as soon as possible, so I agreed to lend him the coins he wanted. At that point, Gabriel stopped answering my messages, which surprised me greatly. He then removed me from his list of friends on our favorite game, and I never heard from him again. I couldn't believe it and went mad. So I drew up a plan for revenge. I hid in Gabriel's house and waited for Gabriel to be alone. And one day it was the perfect moment. His mother had left and he was alone. So I knocked on his door and he opened up to me. I forced my way into his house and locked the door. I then started torturing him and raped him. Then I took the power cable from his computer and strangled him with it. He stopped moving and I took his body and tried to take him to the cellar of the house, but as I moved him, I realized that his body was too heavy, so I started to cut off his legs, and that's when Gabriel started to wake up, but I continued what I was doing all the same. I then continued to move the body, and his brother arrived shortly afterwards, discovering the horrible crime scene I had committed.
This might be the most gruesome death of all time, and whatever you do, don't look up the picture. This is 18-year-old Nikki Castoris, and on Halloween 2006, she crashed her father's Porsche 11 driving at more than 100 miles per hour. She was trying to switch lanes when she suddenly clipped another car, lost control, and then flew over the middle of the highway onto traffic lanes and into a concrete toll booth. And when police arrived, they walked into literally a nightmare. They arrived minutes later and they found Nikki's body still strapped to the driver's seat, but her head, however, was no longer attached to it. Nikki's head was completely severed in half and it wasn't a head anymore. I can't even describe what it looks like because it's so disturbing. The wreckage and the scene were so brutal that the coroner wouldn't let her parents identify her body. But unfortunately, her parents were not spared from seeing the gruesome scene. Photographs of Nikki's death had somehow found their way onto the internet, and they spread extremely quickly. MySpace pages who were acting as some sort of tribute for Nikki's death posted the horrifying pictures of the accident. Nikki's parents then received countless emails of the photographs, and there was no escaping the trauma. I really urge you never to look up this photo because it might be one of the most disturbing things you will ever see. This case should be an eye-opener to everybody to not drive recklessly, because as you can tell, your life can be taken from you in a split second.
Okay, actually though, that's a crazy story. Kayla Unbian was just 9 years old in 2017 when she was abducted in Chicago. Her father had just won custody of her, and when he went to go pick her up from a camping trip that her and her mother was on, she was gone. Kayla's mom took her and they split, and he was pretty sure that he was never going to see her again. But then Netflix has this show called Unsolved Mysteries, and they aired an episode about children that were kidnapped by their parents. At the end of the episode, they flash this image on the screen, and it is only on screen for 4 seconds. But then flash forward to last month, there's a person shopping in a grocery store in North Carolina, and she sees this woman in the store and she's like, that's the woman from the poster. The woman in question is with a 16-year-old girl, so the shopper runs to the front desk and is like, we have to call the cops right now. And they were right. The cops picked them up and they were able to reunite Kayla with her dad 5 years later. This goes to show that even when you're watching something really fast, your brain is still registering it and you can still use that information to potentially help someone.
My husband killed me and bricked me into a wall after a violent argument, and my body was only discovered 9 years later in the attic of our house. My name is Sabora Gagani, and I was 22 years old at the time of the incident in 2014. I was living with my boyfriend, Marco Gallo Romero, who was 36 years old at the time. Initially, everything seemed fine, but I quickly realized that it was just a facade of his personality because our relationship became toxic. I even talked to my mother, informing her that I urgently needed to break free from his control and leave. But I didn't have time to do so. On July 7th, 2014, Marco and I had an argument, and he stabbed me. He then decided to make a hole in the wall of the attic of our house, and that's where he chose to hide my body. My family quickly became worried about my disappearance, and Marco assured them that I had run away without leaving a trace. Yet he knew the truth. It was on May 17th, 2022 that Marco was arrested, not for my murder, but for that of his girlfriend Paula. He stabbed her 14 times. Once at the police station, he confessed to killing me and bricking me 9 years earlier. He then pointed out the exact location of my body, and I was able to be identified by the tattoos I had on my body. So, in your opinion, what punishment does he deserve?
I was tortured to death and raped by 100 gang members. My name is Junko Furuta, and this is my story. I was only 17 years old and living a peaceful life in Tokyo. I was a studious student, but everything changed when my classmate Hiroshi Miyano made advances towards me, which I refused. On November 22nd, 1988, when I was walking home from school, I was kidnapped by him and 3 other men. They took me to a hotel. They held me captive and tortured me for 44 long days. I was raped and beaten every day. I was their punching bag. They started by inserting all sorts of objects like lighted bulbs and fireworks into my private parts. They also had fun hanging me from the ceiling with ropes. They made me take my own urine and eat all kinds of insects, including cockroaches. Then my tormentors invited other people to participate in my rape and torture. On January 4th, 1989, after losing a video game, they beat me for 2 hours with a baseball bat, and burned my eyelids with hot wax. I was disfigured. I no longer had any strength. They ended up burning me alive. I succumbed to my injuries. Right after that, Hiroshi Miyano was sentenced to 17 years in prison, but some received only 8 years in prison and were released.
I bet you didn't know that the original Barbie was based on an R-rated German escort doll. My page is all for people with dark curiosities, and if that's you, I think you'll like the podcast. Okay, so in the 1940s, there was this very provocative German cartoon called Build Lily. And Lily was described as being a gold-digging call girl who would seduce wealthy men. And mind you, this is the 40s, so this is really dicey for the time. Like, here's Lily joking about taking her bikini off in front of a police officer. So by the 50s, they make a doll version of her that's like a gag gift. It's even dicier and more inappropriate than the cartoon was, and men loved it. They just basically gave it to each other. So around this time, Ruth Handler, who's one of the co-founders of Mattel, is traveling Europe. And she sees the slutty Lily dolls and she's like, oh, girls in America will love this. And then in 1959, she debuts Barbie at the New York Toy Fair. Like, you can see that Barbie is just a spitting image of Lily. And apparently Ruth knew it too because she bought the rights to build Lily and she put them out of business. Just something to remember when you watch the movie this month. Barbie was based on a girl who was way ahead of her time.
This is a very recent case, and it's the story of 8-year-old Jackson Morrow. Having an 8-year-old son myself, this one really hits hard. Jackson lived in Michigan with his parents, Mia and Brian. The couple had been investigated multiple times by Child Protective Services over the treatment of Jackson, but he was never removed from their care. This is a prime example of being failed by the system. Jackson attended school at the Logan Autism Learning Center, but the couple soon became sick of the teachers reporting them to CPS for mistreating Jackson, and they pulled him out. Brian Morrow also has a daughter who used to live with the couple and Jackson. She stated to police that they didn't like to deal with their son as he smelt like urine and they'd often lock him away in his bedroom, ignoring his cries. He even broke the bottom of his door so that he could stick his hand out. On May 3rd, 2022, 911 responded to a call from Jackson's grandmother. When they arrived at the Morrows' home, they found Jackson laying on the couch, and it was clear that he hadn't only just passed away. Jackson was extremely thin, and the couple soon revealed to police that he'd actually passed away the day before. They hadn't called authorities because they wanted to spend time with their son before they came and took him away. Later that day, the couple were tested for drugs, and both tested positive for methamphetamine. Jackson's autopsy revealed that he was extremely malnourished. He weighed just 31 pounds, which medical records show was the same weight that he was at just 3 years old. His cause of death was neglect, and it was treated as a homicide. In June 2022, both Mia and Brian Morrow were arrested and charged with 1 count each of first-degree murder. Both Mia and Brian had their charges reduced to second-degree murder after agreeing to plea deals. Mia agreed to serve a minimum of 25 years, and Brian agreed to serve a minimum of 22 years. On sentencing Mia, Judge Laseta criticised her for doing nothing as her autistic son wasted away before her eyes. She said, "He looked to you to protect him. I don't understand this. He weighed just 31 pounds at the age of 8 years old." On March 13, 2023, Mia Morrow received a sentence of 25 to 50 years. And Brian Morrow is due to be sentenced on April 17, 2023.
These are the Tylenol murders, one of America's greatest mysteries. The Tylenol murders are a series of poisoning deaths that occurred in the Chicago area in September 1982. The case remains one of the most infamous instances of product tampering, and led to significant changes in the packaging and marketing of all over-the-counter medications. In the early days of September 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area died after ingesting extra-strength Tylenol capsules that had been tampered with. The victims ranged in ages from 12 to 35, and their deaths were initially attributed to cyanide poisoning. The tampering occurred after the capsules were manufactured and before they reached the store shelves. An unknown person or persons had removed the Tylenol capsules from their original packaging, added cyanide to the pills, and then placed them back into the packages. The tampered bottles were then placed on store shelves for sale. The discovery of the poisoned Tylenol capsules led to widespread panic and fear. Authorities warned the public not to consume any Tylenol products, leading to a massive recall of over 31 million bottles of Tylenol capsules. Other pharmaceutical companies also pulled their products from shelves even though they had not been tampered with, due to concerns about copycat crimes. Law enforcement launched a massive investigation into the Tylenol murders but struggled to identify the culprit or culprits. The tampering appeared to be random and no connections were found between the victims. The perpetrator had seemingly contaminated Tylenol bottles at various locations. The media coverage of the Tylenol murders was extensive, and it had a lasting impact on public perception of product safety. The incident resulted in changes to the way companies package and seal over-the-counter medications to ensure the safety of consumers. No one has ever been charged or convicted in the connections with the Tylenol murders. However, the case prompted Congress to pass the Federal Anti-Tampering Act in 1983, making it a federal offense to tamper with consumer products. The Tylenol murders serve as a chilling reminder of the potential dangers of product tampering and the importance of stricting security measures in the manufacturing and packaging of consumer goods. The victims' families and the public in general were forever changed by this act of intentional poisoning, and the case continues to be a cautionary tale.
This 60-year-old grandfather was murdered while playing Pokemon Go by an armed security guard. So this is Jiansheng Cheng. He was a grandfather who lived in Virginia, and he used to play Pokemon Go with his family members to connect with them. His family members said he played this game exclusively to get closer to members of his family and spend time with them. So on the night of January 26, 2017, Jiansheng was driving through a neighborhood, and he entered private property which belonged to a community clubhouse. 10 days earlier, he had been cited for trespassing on this private property, but on that evening, for some reason, he drove back in search of Pokemon. So that night, recognizing the same blue van, Jonathan Cromwell, an armed security guard, approached the grandfather. So according to the investigation, Jiansheng was in the parking lot of the clubhouse when Jonathan noticed him and stopped his vehicle directly in front of Jiansheng's. Jiansheng's car